Well, again, I can't determine exactly where we cut off in this discussion. I'm going to go back just a little then. We were explaining exactly why Moses had to flee from Egypt. Sometimes people say, well, I mean, he was the prince of Egypt. He could have killed anybody he wanted and gotten away with it. Well, okay, likely not. But anyway, the fact is that he was immensely popular as a military leader. And the Egyptians were already nervous about the Hebrews and their numbers, had already put to death the boy children to keep them from continuing to increase in the number of warriors. And the revelation that Moses was a member of that tribe would have made it necessary, at least in the eyes of the son of Pharaoh, the heir to the throne, to destroy Moses. So it's perfectly logical that Moses' life would have become in considerable danger and that he would have fled from Egypt to preserve his life. And this is important to us because the question does come up very often when we're discussing the Exodus. Well, would Moses really have had to flee just because he killed a slave master who would have been, after all, an ordinary Egyptian anyway, and a member of the royal family surely wouldn't have been put on trial for something like that? We don't know. We don't know one way or the other, perhaps not. But the historical facts surrounding all of this will tell us that, in fact, Moses' life came into danger when it was revealed that he was defending a Hebrew slave, that he himself then was a Hebrew, and his fleeing from Egypt was perfectly logical. And we'll continue now with our story a little bit later, but we did find it necessary to set this historical perspective. And we'll refer back to this a few times during the story of the Exodus, and particularly when we come to the story of Saul and David. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll find out what their real names were from the records of neighboring countries, particularly the Egyptian imperial archives. Remember, the area we now call Israel, Canaan, was in the area of the Egyptian sphere of influence, client states. Really part of the empire, but not totally incorporated into the empire. They had local kings who were subject to Pharaoh, responsible to Pharaoh, and depended on Pharaoh and his army to protect them as well. So all this area was suzerain to the Pharaoh, and Israel as well. So we've got this historical setting now which will help us proceed into our actual discussion of how the Old Testament is about you, but with proper historical understandings of the incidents and events and people that we will be discussing a little later. So thank you, and God bless you. Tomorrow's Meat Fair Sunday. One more week and we'll have the beginning of Great Lent, and we'll have some discussions about Great Lent during Great Lent. So I thank all of you who've written and continue to correspond with us about these events. If you have some particular questions about the story of Moses and the archaeological finds that have given us a new light on this era, on Joseph's presence in Egypt, and on the story of Moses and the beginning of the Exodus, and as we go into the wilderness of the Mount Sinai journal, we'll reflect again on these historical events that surround the story and shed a great deal more light on it. We're going to find out, for example, a little later, why Hannah became the mother of the high priest, or the priest who replaced the priest who offered incense wrongly in the temple. People say, did Moses have to flee just because he killed an ordinary slave master? And they say, would these priests have lost their position if they simply burned the wrong incense on the altar or burned it incorrectly? And we're going to find out there's a great deal more to both stories. We've already examined the bigger portion of the story of Moses and why he fled. So many of these incidents are going to come to light and become more clear and more broadly understood as we proceed in our discussions. So thank you for joining us, and God bless you and keep you, and remember us in your prayers. I'm just waiting a few minutes to see if we can't get enough time in this video so that it doesn't cut off part of this broadcast as well.